No beast could protect the royal eggs until a human stable boy slept beside them. The royal aviary hung from the palace eaves like an afterthought of sky. Woven rafters and lattice stone, where birds of fortune nested beneath banners that smelled faintly of saffron and oil. For generations, dragons and griffins had been tethered to its watch, scaled necks and hooked beaks keen as blades, talons that could pin a thief to the moon. Yet the royal eggs, three opalescent ovals veined with gold, would not sleep. Night after night, the warding beasts paced and roared and beat the air with wings until the palace librarians muttered of curses and the seers burnt more incense than usual. Predators could frighten off thieves and jackals, but the eggs trembled with a worry that no claw could still. They called the boy Jory not as a name, but as a shorthand for too small, too quick, too inconspicuous. He was a stable hand, learned to do hard favors in soft hours. Fetch this at dawn, scrub that at dusk, hold a lantern when the moon was a sliver. Jory had hands with knuckles like riverbed stones and a smile that never quite met his eyes. He slept in the tack room on straw that smelled of horses and lavender. He ate stew that tasted of patience. Nobody remembered who had given him to the stables the winter the palace took in orphans. He remembered only that the stable smelled safe and the horses listened. The royal steward, a woman with a voice of ink and an appetite for order, found Jory one morning tracing the avian carvings on the aviary gate. "You're too small to be useful beyond mucking stalls," she told him. "Yet you linger where the sun does. Pack yourself off and learn a trade where your hands don't freeze." He blinked and shrugged. Persistence was a kind of currency in the stables, and Jory's ledger read full. He worked without complaint because it kept the cold from finding space in his ribs. He noticed everything: the way the elder griffin cleaned its talons, the pattern of moonlight on egg lacquer, the hush that fell when the eggs shifted. One night, when the sky was a bruise and the palace lanterns flickered as if tired, the royal bell clanged through the halls. A messenger returned, winded and white-faced, with news that traders from the northern passes had been found ransacked. The steward paced and spoke of threats, and the king ordered that more guardians be posted. The dragons roared twice as loud. The avian beasts grew restless, and even the oldest garrison bird craned its neck as if listening for something beneath the stone. The eggs began to cry, not with sound, but with the tremulous shiver of life that made the gilding on their shells flicker like oil. That night the keeper assigned a new rotation of watchers. Jory waited, sweeping the courtyard, feeling the cold wedge of fear the palace kept like a locked room. When the last guard passed, Jory found himself at the aviary gate again. He lingered until the granite shadows took on a softness, until the palace quieted to the sibilant breathing of someone who fears being followed. He had seen birds before in books and in the great aviaries of markets, but he knew nothing of prophecy. He only knew the hush the eggs made, and his hands answered the way his feet did when a foal faltered by staying close. He slipped the gate and perched himself on a low stone, back to the wind, and watched the eggs. It felt like waiting with a lantern in a storm, helpless and necessary. The palace beasts noticed him first as a scent, human and small, and then as a shape. A griffin lowered its massive head until the boy could see the weathered ridges of its beak. It exhaled. The air smelled of cedar and iron. Jory bowed his head, because that was what children did when the world was larger than their palms. He reached into his shirt and took out what he always kept: a rag, a stale piece of bread, a scrap of wool, small things a stable boy could spare. By dawn his shoulders ached, and the chill had nested into his ribs, but the eggs had not wavered. Jory told no one he'd slept there. He would have offered excuses if asked: stubbornness, loyalty to beasts. But he knew that the reason was simpler. He had been where the eggs needed a body warm as a human pestle, steady as a heart. Night after night he returned. He tied his hair back and tucked himself beneath the watch ropes, close enough to feel the heat from the elder griffin, but not so close as to make the creature uneasy. He hummed the old songs the grooms taught, work songs and lullabies, and the eggs listened as if they recognized something ancestral in that human rhythm. The palace chroniclers would later write that it was Jory's persistence that did it, but the truth held a softer line. Animals tended to habits, and habits could be reshaped by a patient insistence. On the third night, when boots clattered where the stone met the terrell and shadows moved in the shape of men, the warding beasts stirred and rose as one to meet the threat. Metal flashed, arrows arced. The griffins flared their wings and roared a terrible greeting. Jory felt the vibrations in the soles of his feet. He felt more than fear. He felt a fierce, human edge sharpened like a knife. He clutched a pitchfork, a tool more rust than weapon, and held his ground. The intruders came not as brigands, but as men who had been hired to claim something broken and sell it for good coin. Scavengers of relics, a trade that fed on the desperation of frontier lords. They thought the aviary was for trophies. They forgot that elders kept watch. The beasts tore the night into pieces, talons and beaks like promises, breath like furnace. Jory stood where he had slept, and as men fell back, sheepish and suddenly small, the eggs remained undisturbed, their opalescent skin glowing with a steady light. After the fight, the king came with a quiet that people learn to use when they have felt danger and survived it. He regarded the burned brush and the hooked claws, and then looked down at the boy with hands like river stones. Jory did not stand to salute. He had the reckless, embarrassed pride of someone who had done hard good and had not thought to announce it. "You slept beside them," the king said. Jory nodded. They were cold. The king's eyes were older than Jory's knees. He walked the aviary, fingers trailing along the egg's cool curves, and pronounced, less as a decree than an observation, that there were feats of guarding beasts could not perform. To stay when the night was soft with dread, to keep company with fear until it shrank. A beast could not hum a lullaby. A beast could not hold a callous skirt of bread or a palm for a tremor. A beast could not choose to stay for the invisible reasons a human heart kept its vigil. Jory's duty changed then, not in title, but in measure. The palace gave him a cot in the attic and a cup of sweet milky tea in the mornings. The royal chroniclers wrote a short note and added a flourish that made the boy into a symbol. Smallness protecting greatness, humility warding the future. But when Jory tied the sun's last light into his hair and hummed beneath the rafters, he did it for reasons no chronicle could record. He slept beside the eggs because someone had to keep them warm, because a human touch can steady the tremor of becoming. The beasts returned to the eaves with their claws and their roars, honored but unnecessary. In time, the eggs would hatch. When they did, they would find waiting a world less vicious for the nights a boy had kept watch, and they would remember, perhaps in the first bright rush of air, that not all saviors were scales.